Hi, it's Madeline. It's Wednesday night. I'm coming at you live from Seattle, Washington. I would love to know where you're tuning in from, especially if it's somewhere far and exotic. Let me know what's going on. Tonight's topic, we're going to be talking Pinot Noir. I have a couple of wines picked out. If you were able to find them, awesome. We'll talk about those in a minute. If you weren't and picked out something else, I want to know what you are drinking. So write down what you're drinking. Tell me specifically, more importantly, where is it from? Are you drinking Pinot even? Maybe you're drinking champagne tonight. I don't care. That sounds delicious. So thanks for joining me. It's getting close to the holidays and it's time to drink some red wine. Tonight's topic is Pinot Noir. Why Pinot Noir? And more specifically, we're doing Oregon versus California. And the reason why this is such a cool thing to compare is because when you get a Pinot Noir from California over here, it's going to taste a lot different than a Pinot Noir from Oregon. But why is that? And what can you expect? So if you can learn the differences and understand how climate affects these wines, well, my friend, you are the master at that point. It's going to be awesome. So let me talk about my wines. Oh, upstate New York. Hold on, we got some people replying. Not exotic, in from New Jersey. That is so exotic. Back in Paso in a few days. Awesome, great. Melanie McBride is tuning in from Canada with 4 people. Woohoo! Go Melanie. Ooh. Wow. So, okay, we've got some comments already. All right, so we're comparing. Okay, so here's my California wine. I have the William Hill Estate Pinot Noir from 2014. This is from the Central Coast of California. So the Central Coast is kind of like this big sort of bucket of an AVA that contains several other AVAs inside it. Mendocino's in there, throw a little Sonoma's in there, throw a little Napa Valley, and they all kind of squish them together, and they make this one sort of encompassing sort of general California, Central California AVA. And now this one is from the Willamette Valley of Oregon. This is Willamette Valley Vineyards, their whole cluster Pinot Noir from 2014. Again, same thing. Oregon, there's so many AVAs in Oregon, but most of everything is inside the Willamette Valley AVA. And you got a little Dundee Hills over here and that sort of thing. This one's actually south of Salem, Oregon, right off the I-5. I used to drive up and down the road and see that vineyard when it was being planted when I was growing up. And these are the wines. So let's see what everybody else is drinking now that I've talked about my wines. We weren't able to find the Willamette Valley Vineyards Pinot. Oh, but we could find the Willamette Valley Vineyards Pinot, but we couldn't find the William Hill. So we got another one, the 667 Pinot Noir from Central Coast, California. Dude, rock on, Brian. That's awesome. Good alternative. Yeah, dude, some people were drinking a red blend. That's okay. We've got a Domaine de Roche bean. Is that... Oh, wow. La Crema and a Burgundy. That's awesome. Oh, that's going to be an amazing comparison. Love it. Okay, so, and we even have somebody tuning in from Seattle. Hi, Bob. Okay, so when we are talking about climate and how it affects wines, I'm going to go through tasting these wines and I'm going to talk about them, and I want you to do the same thing with yours. And I'm going to look at the color and I'm going to talk about the flavors. I want you to pay keen attention to, specifically, what are the primary fruit flavors you're getting. And if you have a book and you want to follow along in the book to get some ideas, it's on page 100 is the Pinot Noir page. There's a whole bunch of tasting things. So I'm specifically asking, what fruit flavors might you be getting? And then you'll notice we have a little thing over here, cool climate to warm climate. I want you to pay attention to fruit flavors for this reason. And then secondly, the acidity. What kind of acidity? Is it really, really tart like a green apple, or is it a little softer? Pay attention to that acidity level. And finally, the third thing to pay attention to is alcohol. How much do you feel that warmth in the back of your throat when you're tasting these wines? So I'm going to start first with the cooler climate wine. That is, if you're just looking it's a Willamette Valley Oregon Pinot Noir. So this is the Oregon wine. It's the first wine we're going to taste. And the first thing we're going to do is take a look at the color. All right. So I'm looking at the color of this wine. And if you can see here, you can kind of see through it. It's a little translucent. It goes out to, from my eyes, almost to sort of an orangey garnet rim to a nice deep, sort of a nice medium saturation garnet center. This is the Oregon wine. This is a cooler climate wine. And when I give it a swirl and look at the tiers of it, I can see that they just look about average to me. They look like medium red wine color. All right, so there we go. This is the color of this wine. Now let's give it a whiff and smell what we can smell. All right, so when I smell wine, you can get a little caught up in like, what am I tasting? What are all these different smells? But what I really like to do is, what is that first smell that I get? That first like initial And with this wine, you saw that I did a quick whiff and I put it down. I got almost like this cranberry sauce. Like it's like, ooh, cranberry sauce. Definitely cranberry sauce. And then after that, I start finding all the other flavors. I'm getting a little bit of cherry sauce. I can almost sense almost this funny sort of clove, like richer clove note to it. And there's almost this sort of funky, it's almost like soil, but it's not soil. Like almost like freshly wetted concrete. You walked outside, it's a summer rain, and just like that beautiful aroma of petrichor evaporating off of the road. So that's what I'm smelling this wine. I'm going to give it a quick taste so I can tell you about alcohol and acidity. Wow. I'm pretty impressed with this. For an Oregon Pinot Noir for the price, this is, in my opinion, they did a really good job here. This wine has these sort of sweet fruit flavors, like very candied cranberry, almost this like brown sugar, and then I feel a bit of burn of the alcohol for sure, and quite a lot of acidity that comes from like right here on the side of my mouth, and then it keeps going. The acidity, I can keep feeling the acidity in my mouth, so I feel like it's got pretty good balanced acidity. It's got a lot of the sweet fruit flavors, and all around, like opinion-wise, this is a pretty good wine. So I've taken note of what I taste in that, and since I don't have a benchmark of what that acidity level is, I'm not necessarily making my full opinion yet. I want to taste the other wine to do a cross comparison of the two of them. If you happen to have two wines, awesome, you can do the same. If you don't, we can pretend, all right? I can pretend with you. Drakena Wine says, "What? I missed the price. What is it?" Great question. Let me find out. I think it retails for, actually I know. It retails for about $22, and I think for Pinot Noir, that's in Oregon, that's pretty good. That's on the lower side. Melanie McBride is getting baking spices and tobacco. La Crema is peppery, nice gentle tans. Hey Melanie, what vintage is that La Crema? You've got to tell me. And 667, Brian, I want to hear your tasting notes on the 667, if you care to. If you don't, no worries. And hi, Jason Nolan from Canada. Tell us what you're drinking. We want to know what you're drinking. Sorry, I have this terrible accent that I can't let go of today. We have an Aquinas too. What is Aquinas? Tell me what Aquinas is, Melanie McBride. I don't know what you're talking about. All right, so let's talk wine number 2 and take a look at the color. All right, this guy This guy is, as you can see, it's still translucent. It feels like it has a little less rim variation than the last one. I still see that ruby, it's more of a ruby garnet color. I feel like there's a little more violet blue in this color and less garnet, and leading out to a ruby garnet rim. Now, if you can see here, we can compare the two. I don't know if you can tell like I can tell, but I think that the California Pinot looks a little less yellow, like a little less garnet than the Oregon Pinot. That is interesting. That is really interesting. Oh, which one's which? All right, so this guy over here is the California Pinot, and this one over here is the Oregon Pinot. So, Oregon Pinot, I'm seeing a little more orange, and the California Pinot a little less orange and more ruby. That's interesting. So, we're gonna give the California Pinot a taste and a sniff. All right, my first initial impression with this wine, just giving it a quick sniff. Bam! It smells like blackberry, like a blackberry bush. Like very ripe blackberries. All right, now that I'm getting into it, it's a little less of a blow up of blackberries. And I get some more subtle sort of cherry sauce notes to it. It's almost like smelling a root beer. This is weird. Kind of in a good way. Like a very like, ooh, fruit. Like somebody has a huge potpourri thing of like cherries and roses and stuff like that. And then some guy over there just poured a glass of root beer. He's an okay guy. Oh wow. That is remarkably different in a lot of ways, and wow. Okay, I have tasted the wines. I have opinions on the taste. I get a lot deeper, darker fruit than I did with my initial taste on the Willamette Valley Pinot. I get more sort of blackberry notes, backed up with a little black cherry kind of a thing, and then on the finish, I almost get this kind of root beery cola note on the finish. Acidity-wise, it tastes about the same, I would say, as the other ones in terms of taste, but maybe almost a little lighter because I'm not feeling it anymore in my mouth. Like it's not persisting. Sorry, these are my acidity determiners over here. So it's not persisting in the front of my mouth. I'm not watering anymore, but I do feel quite a bit more burn in the back. Oh, wow. We've got some comments. Brian says the 667 has blackberry with a subtle soil smell on the 667. So, ooh, root beer indeed, Jason. Jason, did you find that wine? That's awesome. Zinfandelish, Melanie McBride says about the wine that she's smelling. That's interesting. This is an interesting wine. You know what I also note in this wine, which we can also talk about, is a little bit more tannin. Like it kind of is a little bit harsher and more intense. It tastes a little bit more structured. It tastes a little bit bolder. It tastes a little more dark fruit. This is all Pinot Noir. It's all from 2014. And they are remarkably different. This is Oregon right here. This one's a lot fruitier, light, fresh, lots of acidity, a burn. It still has lots of sweet fruit flavors. And then this guy is more darker fruit. It's got a little more tannin, a little more intensity. And it's got a little more alcohol. It's got a little bit bigger burn. This is the California, by the way. All right, so why does that happen? What does that all mean? And what is everybody getting in theirs? Root beer, like barrel candy, creamy. I taste that in my Cab Sauv Cab. Oh yeah, you taste that in you make a wine? B Kelly W? You said Cab Sauv Syrah Cab Franc blend. I'm impressed, winemaker. Word up. I think we have another winemaker here, Dracaena Wines. Lori, if that is you right now. I know there are a couple of you. Wine 667 starts off more fruity with a peppery bite. Wow, that sounds intense. I'm drinking Plum Hills Pinot Noir from the Willamette Valley. Bought it this summer at the vineyard. Wow, that's amazing. Wow. What a special wine. Awesome, Kathy. Thanks for letting us know. Let us know your tasting notes. That sounds interesting. I've never tasted that wine before. 2012 was an awesome vintage, too. Way to buy a great vintage. Okay. So now here's the part where we need to use our brains. And after drinking a couple tastes of wine, it can be difficult to do so. And I'm going to challenge myself to do it because for the good of Pinot Noir in Oregon and in California and the rest of the world for that matter, whoever's drinking the Burgundy, tell me how different it tastes. Tell me how crazy, crazy different it tastes. I have money on how earthy and how much different it tastes. I want to hear your tasting notes. That's going to be awesome. So when talking about climate, and I remembered I want us to think about fruit, acidity, and alcohol. Now I'm going to give you the hardcore stats on these wines because it makes it a lot easier for me. Here we have the California Pinot. This one has a pH of 3.771. Now pH in wines range from about 2.5 to 4.5, and this one's 3.7, which is pretty average, maybe a little bit heading up towards high in terms of, but not for California. That's pretty good. The total acidity is 6.2, so that's the level of acid in the wine, and the pH is how acidic that acid tastes. It has 4.2% alcohol. Now Oregon, now remember 14.2% alcohol? Oregon only has 13.7, so it's a little lower alcohol. It also has 3.68 pH, so it's a little higher acid, and a total acidity of 7.72. Now, again, just let's talk about pH for a second. The difference between 2 pH and 3 pH is 10 times. So if I have a 3.71 versus a 3.68, that might sound like a very small amount of difference, but it's actually 3 points. And that's like 30%. This one has 30% more acidity, whereas if it was like this one's 3.71, the California, and this one's 3.68, the Oregon. This one has less acidity, or it tastes less acidic. It literally has less acidity too. So those are the stats on these guys. And then here's a little fun fact on both of these wines. This one's got residual sugar. Can you believe it? A dry wine with residual sugar. It has a small amount. It's only 3.5. That's just a teeny bit of a teaspoon in your glass, so it's not that much. And then this guy is made with a special winemaking practice called carbonic maceration, which reduces tannin. And that's why this wine tastes so fruity and has like no bitterness whatsoever. It's very sweet and fruity. All right, so Buddy Edwards says, I love this. More herb plant tastes and red fruits. Melanie McBride has confirmed that Burgundy is the earthiest of them all, and I would second that and totally agree. And that are in the lab are having Burgundy in California. That's a great comparison. Buddy Edwards, thanks for tuning in from Louisiana. It's Louisiana. It's going to be, are you 2 hours ahead or 3 hours ahead? I don't know. I love the J-Lore, especially from Paso Robles. Okay, awesome. So Monterey County, J-Lore Monterey County, do you like that wine? I want to know. Burgundy, more acidity, very earthy, ripe, dark, cherry, plum flavors. These are great notes. So we've learned that ultimately you've got two wines, both the same variety, and depending on what you prefer, you can find what you like. Hotter climates are going to be bolder. They have higher alcohol and darker fruit. Cooler climates tend to taste a little lighter, tend to have lighter, more elegant fruit flavors, or like red fruit flavors, if you will, and a little less alcohol. And then the climate will affect those dominant fruit flavors. And this is why in the book we say that cool climate, you get more of a cranberry flavor. In warm climate, you get more black plum. And I would hazard to say that this California actually has quite a bit of black plum notes to it. All right, so I'm reading some comments. Does anyone have any questions for me? I want to hear from you. And what's going on? We'll be not doing the tasting next week, but the week after. And it'll be a tasting on port. We're going to do the difference between ruby and tawny port wine. So definitely tune in for that. If you can pick up a bottle of ruby or tawny or both, that would be great. And I want to see if you have any questions for me about either of these wines or anything about Pinot in general. I'd be happy to tell you. There is one thing, a little factoid I want to give you as a special treat. I loved reading this in Jancis Robinson's Wine Grapes book. It's this I have it, this 7-pound thing. Pinot is basically the same as Pinot Gris, and the same as Pinot Blanc, and the same as Pinot Meunier. They're all the same grape. They are just simply mutations, color mutations of the same grape. So the next time you drink a glass of Pinot Grigio, you're drinking Pinot Noir too. Well, sorta, kinda. A pink version of it. So that's my cool story for you about Pinot and why it's crazy grape. It's a crazy grape. Sorry, I missed which one does the carbonic macerations. Phonetics. The whole cluster by Willamette Valley Vineyards is the carbonic maceration wine. And this is a crazy thing because carbonic maceration is something that's typically practiced on, if you're familiar with the region of Beaujolais in France, it's very popular as a winemaking style that's done there. But they're experimenting with that in Oregon, and the reason they're doing that, and I think this is a perfect example of why, is they're trying to reduce the intensity of the tannin. Still, this term whole cluster is exactly how they're actually making the wines. They're getting whole clusters of grapes, like a big old tub of grapes, and then they close it up, and it's full of, there's no oxygen. They completely remove the oxygen, and it's just carbon dioxide that fills up the tank, and the pressure, they start to ferment, but they don't ferment outside of the grapes. They actually ferment inside the grape. So the tannin of the skins don't actually intensify, or the seeds or all the other things don't actually intensify the tannin in the wine. And the reason they're doing this in Oregon a lot is because cool climates tend to produce very earthy wines like you found the one in Burgundy is. All right, I feel like I'm missing out on a huge conversation. I'm going to do one back through and see if I'm missing any questions or comments. Okay. Taste comparison. You do have to do a taste comparison, but don't worry about it. I'm glad you get to join in. This is B. Kelly W. I'm glad you get to join in. I'm sorry you don't have Pinot. That's okay. Enjoy whatever you're drinking. Expressive plum, red apple, black cherry. I would say it's earthier than that. Oh, a suggestion of beetroot. Melanie McBride says that the way Burgundy's working with the intensity of earthiness is they're saying the suggestion of beetroot. Now, I don't know how y'all feel about wine tasting notes, but I truly like honesty, and that's why I put a lot of those types of notes like potting soil or tar in the book, because I want people to admit that sometimes wine can be pretty funky. And sometimes I like to lick rocks. All right, so I have a great comment. Joe Savini says, I'm not experienced, but if somebody told me that the William Hill was Zin, I would believe them. The Willamette Valley, not so much. Well, that's an interesting comment, because Zinfandel is also a wine that when you look at it is very translucent in color, so it's easy to make that comparison. And sometimes the acidity in the Pinot Noir can taste a lot like that peppery flavor you get in Zinfandel. So don't beat yourself up. That's totally okay. So Melanie McBride has an alternative word for beetroot. She says earthy wet garden, and I think that sounds really pretty and delicious. Earthy wet garden is a beautiful description. Where are the best Pinot Noirs from? Buddy Edwards, you're getting right to business. Okay. So the best Pinot Noirs are from places that grow Pinot Noir, period. Pinot Noir is a cooler climate grape. It tends to grow in areas with cool pockets. That's why these grapes for this California Pinot Noir probably come closer to the coast where it's a lot cooler and the fog collects in the morning. So to skirt around your question, I would say look for areas that typically have cooler climates. That coastal part of California all the way down to Monterey, because we have the beautiful Pacific Ocean. Southern part of Chile makes some amazing Pinot Noir. The southern part on the other side of Argentina makes some terrific Pinot Noir. And then you'll find some amazing pockets of Pinot Noir in France. And then over the border into Germany, there's a region called the R that's totally worth checking out. So basically there's sort of this Pinot Noir band that happens. One in the south, let's not forget South Australia and New Zealand. Now, the difference between South Australia and New Zealand, I would say, is very similar to the difference between Oregon and California. New Zealand is a lot cooler climate and style, whereas Australia is a lot more lush and rich in style. So I would say look at those bands and start looking across those bands to try to find the region. So interesting thing enough, if you go east of Germany and you go into a place like Moldova, they're making some Pinot Noir there that's actually pretty good. So you can be really creative and find some excellent Pinot Noir just by being creative with how you look at the world and where those grapes grow. So, awesome. So I would say if there's only one last thing to do tonight, it would be thanks so much for having a drink with me. It's been truly a pleasure to interact with you tonight, and I'm really looking forward to 2 weeks from now when we do port. Look, I drew myself. Don't I have a cool angel ring above my head? Isn't this awesome? All right. Thanks, guys. Have a great night.